It might seem surreal that a cult could be able to operate for decades with dozens of victims of sexual abuse, dozens of victims of torture, and dozens of murder, all tied to it. Like many cults, it's nearly impossible to escape, and all things and all horrors are confined within the commune. But in Colonia Dignidad, something far more sinister and far more systematic was taking place. Colonia Dignidad had something that few other cults in all of history ever had: protection and support from the government. To the outsider, Colonia Dignidad was the picturesque farming community. With a gorgeous backdrop of the Andes near a local river, Dignidad was idyllic. It was the land of milk and plenty, literally. There were cattle grazing the fields, fresh milk, chickens and fresh eggs, a bakery and a hospital that operated as a free clinic to the local towns 2 days a week. Promotional propaganda videos showed women in traditional German maiden garb churning butter and men working in the fields. But the German choir songs and chants in the field weren't quite enough to make you forget about the barbed wire fence that completely surrounded the enclave. Why would a place like that need such measures to keep everyone in? Why did they want to keep the rest of the world out? From the beginning, Colonia Dignidad had an exterior facade of a perfect religious and agricultural community, but operated as something far more. From the outside, Dignidad was set up as a charity organization, even with a public hospital that non-residents might be able to get care for their children. Except, the residents in the local town of Parral didn't trust the Germans who lived within, using the hospital only as a last resort. The townspeople were reportedly wary of some of the guests and visitors who visited Dignidad, and some of the unexplainable activities that took place within the perimeter. There have been reports from people in the local town that the residents of Dignidad celebrated festivals that were not on the Christian calendar, with torches and chants in the woods at night. A bit of an oddity for a deeply religious Christian sect. Were there Nazi traditions practiced within the camp? Stepping into Colonia Dignidad at its peak of 300 members must have been like stepping into a time and space warp. Old-fashioned 1930s and 40s era clothing was worn, and only German was spoken. It was as if suddenly placed in Germany pre-war. Despite an intricate communication system used by colony leaders, there was no television, radio, or newspaper for the members. They knew who the president of Chile was, and they knew that Paul Schaefer was their god. The carefully constructed Colonia Dignidad was built and reinforced not like a cult commune in the mountains, but as a fortress, much like the other Nazi strongholds, with bunkers, safe rooms, barbed wires, and intricate systems of security, where the laws of Chile would not apply. If there's any group that knows how to set up a system of programmatic torture and destruction, it's the Nazis. When the true extent of the widespread horrors of the Holocaust were revealed to the world after World War II, it was nearly unfathomable how efficiently the Nazis were able to nearly exterminate an entire race. They carefully constructed extermination camps and labor camps for maximum mass murder, and they also had lavish secret hideouts, bunkers, and lairs for the highest party and SS members to hide and even escape Perhaps that's why the Chilean government, under the military dictatorship of Pinochet, sought out Colonia Dignidad as a center of torture and mass murder for his own regime. He was going to the experts. These reinforcements for the camp were not just to keep people from leaving the colony, but to protect the Nazi and SS officials who were within the camp. Walter Rauff, the creator of the mobile gas chambers, was known to have lived in Dignidad for a period. Klaus Schnellenkamp, identified as a part of Hitler's personal bodyguard formation, was a part of Colonia Dignidad's leadership, one of Paul Schaefer's right-hand men. And perhaps most horrifying, Joseph Mengele was a frequent visitor to Colonia Dignidad, continuing to perfect and test his methods of torture. Colonia Dignidad was a safe refuge for notorious Nazi fugitives. It was built to protect the highest levels of authority, both Nazi and Chilean military dictatorship. The ties and connections between Paul Schaefer and the Chilean government were far tighter than its members realized. But first, it's important to understand the prevalence of Nazis in Chile and how they were involved in a coup d'etat that ultimately led to a military dictatorship ruling the country. Going back to the era of colonization of the New World from Europe, South America was largely a conquest of the Spanish, who retained close ties with Italy and Germany. The close cultural ties were apparent during the war and after, solidified by routes of escape. There were many immigrants from Italy, Spain, and Germany who went to South America even before World War II. And beginning in the 1930s, a large number of German Jews fled as the anti-Jewish Nazi Party rose to prominence. So this is not to say that all Germans who left Germany were Nazis. It's important here to note that the Nazi Party was formally and officially called the National Socialist German Workers' Party. But in reality, the Nazi Party had little, if anything, to do with socialism ideology. Many Nazis, in fact, took issue with socialism being part of the party name, and quite honestly has led to confusion of many even today. If communism is on the far left of the political spectrum, with socialism being left-center-ish, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazism, or fascism, is on the very, very far right. A core component of Nazi ideology touted by Adolf Hitler is hatred of, well, a lot of things, but including communism. And so there was a large Nazi presence in a significant portion of South America, with several parties with similar, albeit confusing names, like the Organización Nacional Socialista Americana, the American National Socialist Organization in Bolivia, and Partido Nacional Socialista Obrero de Chile, the National Socialist Chilean Workers' Party in Chile. And in Chile, there were no fewer than 3 Nazi parties when the war began. And of course, Juan Perón in particular was quite the fascist, fascinated by Adolf Hitler's charisma. Gestapo activities in the South American region were based in Buenos Aires. To Perón, who certainly had appreciation for the finer things based on his lavish spending of national funds for personal use, admired the swagger and fancy uniforms. You didn't need to have a strong command of political philosophy to be a fascist dictator. You just needed power. While it might surprise some to find that Nazism, which includes a doctrine of racism, could find prominence in South America, an area with wide racial diversity, it certainly didn't stop those of European descent from discriminating against the indigenous inhabitants. And with a relatively small Jewish population to marginalize as the enemy, the biggest enemy that the Nazi parties of South America took hold of were communists. Under Perón in Argentina, Nazism was embraced, and although Argentina declared war on the Axis powers a month before the war ended, it was a pure facade. It was after Perón's fall in 1955, though, that the new government was so anti-everything Perón ever stood for, did the Nazis have to find solace elsewhere, many crossing into Brazil, Paraguay, and Chile. The intense racism, anti-Semitism, and classism in Chile can be traced to the Nazi presence there. Paul Lavanda, who in hindsight might have traveled to Colonia Dignidad in a state of lunacy, personally visited the entrance gates in the late 1970s. He wrote in his book An Unholy Alliance about the close ties between the Nazi parties and Chile. He described how, quote, in 1963, a year after the colony first established itself in Chile, the Partido Nacional Socialista Obrero de Chile, the National Socialist Chilean Workers' Party, was formed under the leadership of Franz Pfeffer. Taking more than its name from the National Socialist German Workers' Party, it became famous for its swastika banners, armbands, fascist salute, and Heil Hitlers, as it attracted approximately 10,000 members in its first year. And Pfeffer was only one of many neo-Nazi organizations in Chile, including the lethal swastika-branding Patria y Libertad, Fatherland and Liberty, party founded by Pablo Rodriguez Grez, a member of Jorge Alessandri's unsuccessful 1970 presidential campaign. But it was the only one to host a Miss Nazi contest, to which Nazi organizations throughout South America sent their dewy, swastika-eyed contestants. End quote. But in 1970, Salvador Allende, a Marxist, was elected president of Chile in a runoff election. And so, with many Nazis belonging to several different parties with a true hatred of communism, Allende was a threat. Allende had to go. And even though Allende was elected democratically, during the Cold War, communism was a threat to the U.S. as well. With support of the CIA under Nixon and Kissinger, Allende's leadership came to an end with a coup d'etat. Better to have a military dictatorship supported by Nazis, I guess. Allende presided over Chile for 3 years before the coup d'etat that ended in Allende's suicide. But during those years, Colonia Dignidad was preparing for the enemy. With the help of the military, the enclave became a fortress in the forest. When Augusto Pinochet came into power via the coup, the Patria y Libertad and the Chilean Nazi Party members helped round up the typical enemies of the state, the opponents of the army and the government, but also intellectuals, students, and of course, communists. Tolerance for the Nazis became even greater under Augusto Pinochet, who ruled from 1973 to 1990. Those who Pinochet didn't have killed immediately by DINA, Pinochet's secret police, were sent to none other than Colonia Dignidad for something far worse. Located 220 miles south of Santiago in the province of Linares, Colonia Dignidad is separated and secluded from any major city. The location was chosen and constructed so that even if anyone managed to escape the barbed wire fence that surrounded the compound, the armed guards, and dogs, there was nowhere to run. 5 miles south of the colony center and further surrounded by barbed wire fences and sitting 3,000 feet off the valley floor is a massive 2,500-foot watchtower, tactically positioned with a view overlooking the entire valley and colony. It's also wired with a radio and telecommunication system. From the tower, one can see for miles, offering guards an hour or more of lead time of a possible intruder, and a bird's eye view of anyone seeking an escape. The colony grew to 37,000 acres and is completely surrounded by barbed wire fencing that also includes intricate sensors and wires within the posts, with infrared trips so that anyone, even an animal, who so much as touched the fence would signal an alert to an intricate and massive switchboard in a bunkered command station from within, lighting up to alert from potential intruders or escapees. Thousands of infrared trips scatter across the exterior of the perimeter fence, hidden in painted styrofoam camouflaged as rocks, so expertly hidden that they look like they could have been made on a Hollywood set. Panel boxes and command centers hide in the ground cover. There's layer upon layer of protection and control. Guard towers, perimeter barbed wire fencing with trips, patrolled by armed guards and dogs, and even on the one road that goes into the colony is an extremely powerful underground hydraulic-powered barrier system so large that it could stop a tank. For those living within the colony, of course, leaving was off limits. Anyone who tried to escape were bitten by the dogs or clubbed or even shot by the armed guards that patrolled the fence. Electroshock therapy and drugs were also used to warp the minds of the members and to rehabilitate them back into the commune society. Fear was used as a psychological tool to comply. And there were also areas within the commune fence that were off limits to people who lived there, except the leaders. Beneath the commissary, under several feet of concrete, lies an intricate underground bunker system protecting the telecommunications center that connects to the fence tripwire security system, as well as the means to communicate the information that Schaefer had promised to the Chilean government, and to receive orders directly from the government as well. The bunker and tunnel system has rooms containing thousands of communication nodes and wires, demonstrating not just two-way communication, but one that for its time was state-of-the-art and more advanced than some military bases today. The bunkers beneath also contained plumbing systems, complete with sinks, showers, and small kitchens, where someone could hide for an extended period of time. The potato cellar is lined with carpet on the floors, walls, and ceiling, soundproofed to ensure that no one, even within the enclave fence, could hear the screams. A command base, like a duty station, connects to the intricate system of tunnels and bunkers within the compound. There was also a warehouse in the center of the compound that was a restricted area. Any colony member who got close would be tortured to near death. It was where weapons of war were manufactured. Machine guns, automatic rifles, rocket launchers, ammunition, and even sarin gas. Within these walls was the largest arsenal ever found in private hands in Chile, and the cache of weapons date back to the 60s and 70s. Why in the world would a religious and agricultural cult have such an intricate communication and fortification systems? Why would a Nazi stronghold in the middle of Chile be manufacturing machine guns and chemical weapons like sarin gas?